bx plus, like, what is that, c?
Mm-hmm. Ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. We always, when solving the equations, we always set it equal to 0 for our solving purposes. I shouldn't say always, almost always. We do. If you're going to do a quadratic formula or anything like that, you have to have all the terms on one side in order to be able to do it. We prefer, when we're solving these, probably everybody's favorite method is just factoring. You know, if you can break them into the two parentheses. And then once you do that, you can solve them pretty easily, because if you have two things multiplied that equal 0, what's the only way to get 0? When you multiply two numbers and get 0, one of them has to be 0. So if we can get it set up like that, then we can just set those things equal to 0. So let's solve this equation. What would I need to do to solve that? Mm-hmm. We prefer to keep the squared term positive. So I'm going to add over my x and subtract my 12. So the x squared plus x minus 12 equals 0. Does it bother you guys if I don't write, the plus x and minus 12? Okay. Then what? Mm-hmm. Two parentheses. X squared would just break into x. Remember, you multiply to the constant and add to the middle term. So multiply to a negative 12 and add to a positive 1.
Negative 3, positive 4.
Yes. And how did you know you had to switch those signs?
Because there's really one before the x. So
Right. We have a positive x, so those have to add up to a positive 1, so the bigger one had to be the positive. All right. What if... Oh, so at this point, what do we have to do to finish solving it?
make it equal 0.
Mm-hmm. So you set both of those equal to 0. And we get positive 3 and negative 4. Did I skip any steps that bothered you? Tell me if I need to show more. Typically, quadratic equation, so it has an x squared, so how many solutions are we looking for at the end? 2. Quadratic should have 2 solutions. Let's look at this one. What do we need to do here?
Take the x out.
Mm-hmm. So first step when we're trying to factor, you always check for a greatest common factor, and we have that yet. So if you take out the x, that leaves us with x minus 9 equals 0. So what are the solutions?
0 and 9.
Mm-hmm. You have two things multiplied. It seems like people always forget if there's just a plain x out there, you're setting each of those to 0. So we just get 0 and positive 9 for our answers. Let's try and go to this one. First step,
Move everything to one side.
so I want to keep my square positive. I'm going to write it as 4x squared minus 12x plus 9. What'd you guys do on these?
Slip and slide.
Mm-hmm. So you bring that 4 down. So that's x squared minus 12x plus 36. Multiply the 36, add to negative 12.
-6 and -6.
And then what do we have to do? Okay, 6 over 4 reduces to 3 over 2. So that would be 2x minus 3. And we get that for both of them. So if we set that to 0, what do we get? Now, if you do it for both of them, you get the same answer both times. We are going to have that happen, and we'll get into things beyond quadratics. If I get the same answer 4 times, I don't want it written 4 different times. Do you remember, how do you write something if it's a solution multiple times?
2 power of it.
Kind of. You put like a little m with it, and then the number of times. Did you talk about multiplicities at all? Have you ever heard that term? Okay. So the power would be right here. You could write that as 2x minus 3 squared. In terms of our solution, what we will write is 3 halves. How many times was this a solution? Twice. So we put an m, which represents multiplicity, and then a 2. So what that means is 3 halves is the solution 2 times. And when we get into graphing and things, it really matters how many times something is a solution. So that's why we need to include that multiplicity instead of just writing it once. So if you want to make yourself a little note, repeated solutions are called multiplicities. The first one, I'm going to all that over the 3. And no greatest common factor, so slip inside. Multiply negative 18, add to positive 7, so positive 9, negative 2. But then we have to remember what? Divide by 6. So 9 over 6 is 3 over 2, so 2x plus 3. 2 over 6 is 1/3, so 3x minus 1. Set those to 0, and you should have gotten negative 3 halves and positive 1/3. E. This one's pretty easy. You can just factor right away. So x minus 7, x plus 1. So you get 7 and negative 1. And F. I thought I might trick you with those, but you all got the first step. What do you have to do first? Greatest common factor. Something I want to warn you as well, on slip and slide method, if that first term is negative, it doesn't always work. So if it has a negative x squared, go ahead and pull out that negative as a greatest common factor as well. So we can take out a 2. So slip and slide for that. So x plus 5, x minus 4, we still have our 2. Divide by 10. So 5 over 10 is 1/2, so 2x plus 1. 4 over 10 is 2/5, so 5x minus 2. Set them equal to 0. We have 3 things. Does 2 ever equal 0? No, so we just ignore that. It doesn't give us anything. So our solutions are negative 1/2 and positive 2/5. Any questions for me there? You guys seem pretty good with those. You remember? It's always a good thing. What if I gave you this problem? So we're gonna try a new set of problems here. A little bit different. What did I do to solve for x here?
Can't you do like the square root of that?
Mm-hmm. And if you add a square root in a problem,
Plus or minus.
plus and minus. Always add that plus and minus. So we get x to equal plus and minus the square root of 5. Do you remember what that method's called? Square root method. So we've been factoring nicely. Square root method is also an option. So if I gave you this problem, we could multiply everything out and bring over the 16 and refactor, but that's kind of creating more work for ourselves. If we look and I ask you to solve for x, there is only one x in this problem. So if you need to get it by itself, what do? Square root. With that we said you do plus and minus, so x minus 2 equals plus or minus square root of 16 is 4. Now, this is where I see mistakes. People add over the 2 and say the answer is plus and minus 6. What's wrong with that?
The factors were -4.
What this means right here is that x minus 2 could equal positive 4, or x minus 2 could equal negative 4. If you add that 2 over, we get a 6 here, but this one, negative 4 plus 2 is negative 2. So you do need to think about separating those when you go to add that over to make sure you don't have any mistakes. The other option, sometimes people can just think about, if I add over my 2, you could write it as 2 plus and minus 4. So 2 plus 4 is 6, 2 minus 4 is negative 2. So whether you have to write it out or you can do it from that step, either way is fine. Alright, here's a couple for you. So we have x minus 1 equals plus or minus 2. You add over 1, you get 1 plus or minus 2. So 1 plus 2 is 3, 1 minus 2 is negative 1. Here's all that one. D, square root, plus or minus, so x plus 3 equals plus or minus, what's the square root of negative 49?
7.
So then, when you add over, or subtract over that 3, we can't actually add those, so we just leave it like that. Negative 3 plus or minus 7, 9. So, the next piece is completing the square, but that one takes me a little bit longer to get through. So what I'm going to ask you to do is, I'm going to put the steps for completing the square up here. And I want you to write that down in your notes, but we're not doing it today. And I'll go ahead and put the homework up as well. So once you get these steps written down, so we're good to go on Monday, you can start your homework. Okay? So I'm not going to talk about these at all today. We're just going to pick up there Monday.